All right, continuing where we left off. Grab my clicker. So we talked about sit.
We're fighting over the baby. Don't mind us. You can never hurt her. Look, there's only like two of us. Fine. Fine.
It's not like you didn't get her
Yeah,
all
yeah.
evening.
Okay, you don't have to mention
Friday
that.
night.
Sorry, Justin. Continue.
Okay, thank you.
Our bad. We apologize.
Do I have the floor?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so last weekend we talked about the kingdom of Axum, which was the Ethiopian kingdom around 200 to late 300 AD, right around the same time period as Constantine, who was emperor of Rome. So we talked about how they became influenced by quote unquote Christianity, and their king converted to Christianity, and they became very ambitious and moved over, expanded territory over to the Yemen area in the southern portion of Arabia. And then we talked about King Tuba Abu Karaba, who he went north to prevent the spread of the Byzantine Empire, and his son was killed by Medina, or the folk people of Medina, and so he returned to basically wipe out the people of Medina. And in the process, he became fatally ill, and there were some Jewish or Judean sages, I guess you call them, who helped heal him, bring him back to health. And so in that process, the king, or this king, converted to Judean, or Judaism. And so then when he went back south to the Himmerite kingdom, which is the southern kingdom of Arabia, he essentially made it the state religion.
Is that actual landscape from that region?
This is Ethiopia. Very beautiful.
It looks like it's the American Southwest.
So then over the next 100 years, the southern nation basically went to war against Ethiopia. If you remember, there was a king, but he was actually a Christian who slaughtered Christian converts in Yemen, and that was a move to take power in Yemen. And so the Ethiopian king tried to retaliate and take over that region again, and failed to do so. Then he established a peace treaty with this king, and in that process, the Himyarites sought out help from the Persian Empire, and so the Persian Empire went and took over the region, and instead of returning the land back to the Himyarites, they basically took it for themselves and set up their own vassal king. So that's essentially the end of the southern kingdom. And so they dispersed into the central region of Saudi Arabia. Okay. All right. So this is just showing the reason why the Persian Empire was so interested in that area of Yemen, because there were some well-established trade routes that went over to India that offered a lot of capital. And in that dispersion of the south, as they integrated in with the Bedouins, the Bedouins became somewhat more unified, and they tried to set up really what was the first unified kingdom of the Bedouins, which was the Kinda kingdom. But it eventually fell apart. All right, so I said last weekend we were going to talk about Muhammad, the entry of Muhammad into history. And to do that, we first have to talk about a couple key components of the pre-Islamic time period. And one of those components is the Kaaba. So according to Islam, the Kaaba is the most ancient shrine of monotheism dating back to Abraham. So according to them, Abraham and his sons built the Kaaba in Mecca. The Kaaba's official name is Bait Allah, which means the house of Allah. It's very similar to, anybody remember the events that happened in the latter part of Genesis 28? Of the what? No. Jacob's ladder? Remember what happened?
Well, Jacob's ladder was during a dream that he had had. Not while he wrestled with God?
No. So yeah, he laid down, had a dream that angels were ascending and descending and assisting him. And so when he woke up, he said, I will name this town Bethel, or Bethel, which means house of God. So very similar to Beit Elah. So same meanings. So the Kaaba was the house of Allah. So it's unknown when the first Kaaba was built, but it is believed that the Kaaba at some point was destroyed, because we do know that in 608 AD the Kaaba was rebuilt by the Quraysh tribe. And at this time, during the rebuilding, during the final pre-Islamic reconstruction of the Kaaba, it housed all sorts of idols that represented deities of all the different tribes. So it was essentially an idol house. Then we have the Black Stone, which, if you remember from the video we watched a few weeks ago, the Black Stone sits inside of this metal. It's supposedly representative of a woman in certain, call it, yeah. The Black Stone already existed with significance during this time, during the rebuilding of the Kaaba. And there's mention of the Black Stone in scripts found that date back as early as the 3rd century. So the Black Stone's been around for a long time. It is believed by the Arabs that the stone was given to Abraham's son Ishmael by the archangel Gabriel during the building of the Kaaba, and that the stone was originally white but was turned black by the sins of the pre-Islamic, what they call age of ignorance. And then, as we'll cover here, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but next weekend, the stone's significance was solidified when Muhammad returned to Mecca, and we'll get into why he left Mecca later on. He returned to Mecca, and he kissed the black stone prior to its integration into the Kaaba. So the stone, essentially this set the stone up to be a source, prior to this it was a source of disunity. It was a stumbling block to the Arabs. So when Muhammad kissed it and dedicated it, it essentially became a mediator between the disputing clans. So it brought them together to carry it, and it became the property of none and the property of all of them. So around the 3rd century, the stone was found during a time when it was hidden for its own safety. And so over that period of time, it was forgotten until the Kuza tribe stumbled across the stone.
How do you know it was the stone? Like the stone.
Good question.
In the box, labeled.
Well, there was, the legends of the stone were still passed orally over periods of time, but yeah, I don't know how they knew exactly it was the stone that was used. My guess is it wasn't just a stone sitting out in the open. It was still encased in, structure that they built it in. So the Kuza tribe said that they would be willing to return the stone to Mecca on one condition, and that was to set the Kuza tribe up as its guardian. And the primary reason for that is the guardianship was as much to do with money as it was for worship, because as we'll get into, people would pay homage to come and kiss the stone. The Kuzas brought the black stone to Mecca and the Kaaba, where the tribe also introduced an idol of the deity Hubal from Syria. So that was Syria's, within the hierarchy of gods, that was one of their, higher deities, Hubal. So the Kuza tribe brought in a idol and set it up, and it became one of the primary gods within the Kaaba. And so the Kuza tribe remained the Blackstone's guardians until about the 5th century. And that leads us to Mecca. So according to the Arabs, when Ishmael was born to Hagar, Abraham took young Ishmael to Mecca and left him there with his mother. So in their place of exile in Mecca, Ishmael became extremely thirsty, and while his mother Hagar searched for water, a divine agency is said miraculously brought forth a spring which is called the Zamzam spring, which still exists today, and it's a very holy site within Mecca. So it's because of this history, according to the Arabs, that Mecca, the history of Abraham and Ishmael and their tie to Mecca, that Mecca has become a focal point. The secular view of Mecca is that its origins stem from being a successor to Petra, Palmyra, and Koryat. So these were primary trading hubs within Arabia. And we'll get into why Mecca basically replaced those trading hubs. It's just to give you an idea. So Petra was a primary trading hub with kind of a gateway between the Mediterranean and the Fertile Crescent, so the northern and southern tribes. So if you remember that trade route, there was a trade route that ran down the two Fertile Crescents down to Yemen. This was a major trading hub because it linked Syria or the Persian Empire to Arabia. So there was a lot of trade done through there, as they had vassal kings set up both in the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. And then Koryat was basically a gateway between the Bedouin tribes and the south. So Mecca stood on an already ancient north-south trade route so if you remember, there's a trade route that runs here. So Mecca was already basically established on that trade route. And it was also at a geographical midpoint between the two Fertile Crescents. So the northern Fertile Crescent and the southern Fertile Crescent. Yes?
On this particular slide here, the nomenclature, Arab view and secular view, why, I mean, they're so different, I just want to know what the premise behind that.
Well, this is when I say Arab view, that's the Islamic viewpoint, so it's religious based, where the secular viewpoint is based on historical evidence. Does that make sense?
Secular to me is like the worldly aspect.
Right, yeah, which typically is, established by geologists, anthropologists. It's more scientific based, logic based. Although that makes us sound kind of ignorant. But I think we do a good job of integrating in secular, historical facts with scripture.
What's a hard subject? Because this is a different religion.
Yeah, and also the huge difference is we have, there's a lot of written history with Judaism, whereas up until around 600 AD, they didn't have much for written history. It was all orally transmitted.
Could both be true?
Sure.
Maybe Mecca became the successor because of its religious importance to the people.
Yeah.
They don't have to be mutually.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Just the fact that, the people of Islam, draw a lot of importance from the genealogy makes it an important site as well. So Mecca also occupied a cultural midpoint between the more settled West Arabia, the northern and southern tribes, to the Bedouin east. So, the Bedouin region almost butted up adjacent to Mecca.
And that's all mountains through there. That's not a flat, easy access, right?
Correct. yeah, this
There's like
whole
narrow
area is like a
channel.
valley.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I wish I should have zoned out here, but this is a ancient representation of what Mecca would have looked like. As we'll get into, the Quraysh tribe basically built up the housings and industrial structures around the Kaaba. Everything was centered around the Kaaba. But yeah, all the surrounding area is mountains. You can kind of see it here.
It reminds me of driving through Salt Lake City, where you've got this relatively narrow valley and then just
Yeah,
straight up.
right.
In Washington, we've got like foothills before the big mountains, so it's kind of like, you can see houses kind of settled up through.
Yeah. That's like driving up to Jackson through Victor, because you're just going through flat mount or farmland, and all of a sudden you hit the Tetons.
From a military perspective or from like a safety perspective, it's probably advantageous.
Yeah. Yeah, so after the Quzay's guardianship of the Black Stone had ended, entered an Arab named Quzay into Mecca. So Quzay is actually the reason why their guardianship ended. So Quzay's origins are unknown, although Arab tradition states that he is a direct descendant of Abraham. So he's a son of Ishmael. Interesting enough, Quzay means little shark or little serpent, and there's a pre-Islamic Himyari poet. Just to read you this poem, it says, a kurash is that which lives in the sea, and from it, Quraysh were called Quraysh. It eats both lean and fat and leaves. Not a feather, it eats both lean and fat and leaves not a feather of any two-winged thing. Thus on land are the tribe of Quraysh. They eat lands up and gobble them down. At the end of time, a prophet they'll have. Many he'll kill and slap in the face. His horsemen and footmen will fill the earth and drive the mounts with a crackle of fire. So I thought that was an interesting quote given its relevance with this tribe and who they will become. So as we'll go through, keep this tribe's name in the back of your mind.
Saddam Hussein had a son named Hussein.
It sounds familiar. I'm not sure though. It wouldn't surprise me because they claim they were true Arabs. So Quzay was able to gain control of the Meccan shrine from the Quza tribe and became king of Mecca. There was also an agreement drawn up between the Ghassanids. Anybody remember where the Ghassanid kingdom was? Correct. North. The Lakhmids. Anybody remember where the Lakhmids were? They were the eastern tribe. The Quda, the kingdom that the Bedouins established, eventually became the Lakhmid kingdom. And then the Himyaris. The Himyaris are what tribe or kingdom? South? Yeah, south, Yemen area. So these three kingdoms established the Quraysh tribe as guardians of the Kaaba. So this was a pretty big deal because prior to this, these three kingdoms, well, one kingdom, the Lakhmids, were controlled by a vassal king of Persia, and the Lakhmids and the Ghassanids and the Himyaris were controlled by a vassal king of Ethiopia. So it was actually I told you wrong. The Lakhmids were controlled by a vassal king of the Byzantine Empire, and the Ghassanids and the Himyaris were controlled by a Persian king. So it was basically a foreshadow of what the Koreyash tribe will be able to obtain, to bring together the people. So the Koreyash tribe were already experts in trade, and as the southern Himyaris kingdom was already in a decline in the 5th century due to the invasion from Ethiopia, the Koreyash were able to gain more control over the Arabian trade routes in general. And so towards the end of the 6th century, the Koreyashi trade also benefited from the Byzantine-Persian hostilities, which caused a shift of traffic from eastern Arabia routes to western ones that were already dominated by Mecca. So during the hostilities, the peak of hostilities between the Byzantine and the Persian Empire, the trade route here, depending on who was seeking or who was delivering the goods, it shifted down this way. And so because Mecca already controlled this region, the trade within that region was a huge boost to them economically. So the Koreyash tribe were also busy cultivating relationships with Bedouin tribes who could be paid and persuaded to protect Meccan caravans and to keep out or raid those potential interlopers. And so the Koreyashi trade network continued to grow until it covered most of the peninsula. So they had a monopoly over all trade within Arabia. The Koreyashi also established Madarba, which is basically a mass pooling of capital or actually investing so that they could stack up even bigger caravans, and which allowed them to trade even further away. So they were really one of the first tribes to function like a bank. Like they would invest their capital, store it. And so of these caravans, they had what was called the summer and winter journeys. And the winter journey was a large-scale trade effort to the south, to the ancient port of Aden, and then the summer journey would go north to the main port of Gaza. So it was a connection. The two journeys. One was a trade or a journey up to Gaza, which was a huge trading event with the region of the Mediterranean, and then the winter journey was connection to the southern part of Arabia, which would have been a huge trading event with India. So all these developments made Mecca the hub of commerce for the whole Arabian subcontinent. The Quraysh tribe also spent significant capital and effort in building up the Kaaba and the surrounding area, making it even more desirable for pilgrimages to the Kaaba and to the mountain of Arafat. So the Hadar people, if you remember, are basically the settled people, or the people that have a tendency to settle a region. They would primarily pilgrim to the Kaaba, so that would be your northern, southern, and northern, southern kingdoms would pilgrim to Mecca each year to worship at the Kaaba, and the Bedouin people would pilgrim to Mecca, and they were primarily interested in Mount Arafat, so they would go to Mount Arafat. And so if you remember that video, Mount Arafat was a significant stop within that pilgrimage, the Hajj. If you remember all those people that were camped out on the base of Mount Arafat. So the yearly pilgrimage also offered a time of peace, as it fell in the middle of an annual 3-month truce in which trading replaced raiding. So during the early portion of the Qurayshi tribes' guardianship, Allah was relatively insignificant within the Kaaba. He was more widely recognized in tribes or regions, kingdoms that were influenced by Judah, or by Judaism. So up until the entry or the midpoint of Muhammad's life, the Kaaba was primarily a center of idol worship. And even the Qurayshi tribe integrated 3 famous female deities, which were Al-Lat, Manat, and Al-Uzza. And they also incorporated images of Jesus and Mary within the Kaaba. So they were smart because they were trying to cater to basically any tribe that would come and visit the Kaaba.
Israel did that too.
Yeah.
Was that a ploy to basically boost commerce in the area?
Yeah. Which leads me to the closing statement. So trade and pilgrimage both led each other, and they fed off of each other. The Meccans traded in both goods and gods. So it was like a tourism is to, you know, some of the town or cities in Hawaii. You know, it was primarily the main, it became one of the main economics of Mecca outside of trade. And that actually their trade increased because of how many people would come to Mecca for religious reasons. So just some general information to gain from this. The Mecca became basically the center of Islam because of its location, its the resourcefulness of the Qurayshi tribe, and how financially focused they were, and their ability to bring people together, and also to remember the Quraysh tribe, because next weekend they're going to become primarily the main focus of Islam, leading up to a huge event. Okay? That's all I got.
Is that the end of your study? Or is it just end of today?
End of today.
I don't know if you touched on it in the beginning there, but when I wasn't here, but with what's said with the idols that they incorporated in this for worshiping, for lack of better my words, what's actually in there?
No one knows. It's even Muslims that go there for the Hajj aren't allowed inside. Well, the idols aren't in there anymore. In fact, it's a point of contention within Islam because the majority of people who aren't, I guess you could say, the secular, draw Muhammad's lineage through individuals who were key figures in establishing some of the idols in the Kaaba, and obviously, you know, how Islam holds Muhammad in such high regard. There's no way he could draw lineage back to, you know, people that would do that. So yeah, it's definitely now it would definitely not house idols, except the one on the corner, the rock. But yeah, really, that's all I know. It's the Kaaba. The current Kaaba is covered in black cloth, and on the east corner, I think it's the northeast corner, is the rock, the black rock. Any other comments or questions? All right. Sorry if I was a little dry.